How goes it, guys? Welcome back to Country Bunkers Trains. I hope all is well and you've had a great start to your new year. Things have been good here, and as you can tell, work has continued in the train room. We got us a big old mountain. Check that out. I figured we'd take a peek at this today, along with a couple other spots I've been working on here in the train room. I also thought this would be a good time to do this. You know, everybody's been going bananas over that dumpster fire of a catalog that came out this past week. I thought this would be a good chance to do something a little bit more fun and a little bit more enjoyable with the hobby. I want to say I'm beyond thrilled with how this mountain scene is turning out so far. You might remember when we started this project a little while back, I mentioned we had two main goals or objectives with this scene, and I think we've knocked both of them right out of the park. The first goal, I've always wanted to have a big, large mountain or hill scene on one of my layouts. I've done some attempts with similar projects in the past, but definitely nothing to this size or this scale. This is by far the largest mountain I've ever built. I would love to go larger, but unfortunately, due to the size of this room and this layout, we are at our max. It seems like we can't go any bigger. The second goal I had for this, I wanted to do something much more visually impressive and had a lot more eye appeal along this back wall, rather than just the standard paper backdrop that we've been using in other areas of the train room here. And this is where it really stands out in my personal opinion. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy our paper backdrops where we have them in the other places, but these really don't hold a candle to this mountain scene in my personal opinion. And like I say, to me, that's where this mountain really stands out. For building the mountain, there's many ways to skin this cat nowadays, with various methods and products to use. On this particular mountain, I used kind of a mix of traditional building methods and materials, as well as some modern stuff that I decided to give a try this go around. The first step for building this mountain involved our good old friend, the pink foam board insulation. Unfortunately, I didn't really get any pics or footage of this, but we've seen this before. I had to cut out and carve up our interior tunnel sidewalls as well as our tunnel portholes. And as you can see, I did try something new over here on this new layout. I also built some retaining walls to get installed next to the portholes. These are playing two roles. These offered kind of a nice, realistic transition from our flat ground into our mountain. But these also help create the angle or the slope of our hill that we would be building our mountain into. With the walls all carved, painted, and weathered, they got secured in place with hot glue. Our next step, while we still had easy access into what would become the interior of our mountain or our tunnel, we needed to get our ground cover applied. Again, nothing special or spectacular here. For the interior of the tunnels, I use this Woodland Scenic's coarse cinders ballast. This is what makes the floor of our tunnel. It gives kind of a nice rocky floor or a mountain tunnel-esque type of feel to it. And then I apply our ballast mixture. Same as I've done in the past, I use Elmer's school glue and I brush that on where I want to apply the ground cover. I spread the ground cover on and then I come over and lock it in from the top with Scenic cement. This really locks it in and holds it in place and does its job really quite well. And if I ever need to pull it up in the future, I've discovered warm water will loosen this right up and we can easily remove it. But hopefully we'll never have to do that or anytime soon. Now, I will say I don't go crazy on the interior of the mountain with the ground cover. I don't see a point for it. I know some people go all out and they'll apply this stuff throughout the entirety of their tunnels or mountains. I don't do that. I only go as far as you can actually physically see standing outside of the tunnel porthole. I don't see a need to go any further than that. Might as well just save the material and use it elsewhere where needed. For our next step, I needed to get some kind of plateaus or flat ground built into our mountain to support our sign and cabin scene. For this, I just used some scrap wood I had kicking around in the garage. Again, nothing spectacular here, just cut out sections to the sizes that I needed and secured them in place. With all of that out of the way, we could finally start building our actual mountain. And just as the mountaintops above, the skeleton of the mountain is built out of cardboard strips and hot glue. I mean, we've all seen this before, haven't we? It's fairly familiar. I do got to give a big thank you to both my wife and sister. Honestly, this is the least fun part of this project, cutting out all these cardboard strips. One night, I gave them each a pair of scissors and some cardboard, and they went to town for me cutting out the strips needed while I was working on other sections of the layout. That was really a huge help. But once they got those cut, I went to town getting this stuff installed. You kind of install this stuff and weave it just as you would weaving a basket. It comes out fairly strong. It's not the strongest thing, obviously, only being cardboard, but it is surprising how sturdy it is once you get it all glued together. I also used some cardboard, as you can see in the pics here, to form the driveway coming down to our cabin scene. With the skeleton in place, naturally the next step is applying the body of the mountain, and this is done with plaster cloth. Now, me personally, I only apply one layer of plaster cloth. This has proven to be strong and sturdy enough for my needs, but I still layer a couple different layers of various material on top of this that also help make it a little bit stronger and more sturdy, and these also fill in all the little tiny pinholes that naturally come in plaster cloth. I say this in case you yourself are planning on using this stuff and never used it before. If you were just looking to paint this stuff or only apply paint once finished, you'd probably have to do 2 or 3 layers of plaster cloth to fill in all those little pinholes in the cloth. Next up was applying the rock face to our mountain or rock walls. Initially, I had every intention of doing the good old-fashioned Woodland Scenics rock molds like I've done in the past, using the molds and their hydrocal plaster. And that's actually what I started out doing. This little section here under the sign, that's what this stuff is. But you know what? I spent an entire afternoon and evening building just this little section. It's not hard, but obviously it's quite time consuming and a bit tedious. And it was going to be a little bit expensive doing this whole mountain this way. I was going to need to pick up several more cartons or quarts of their hydrocal, several tubs of joint compound or plaster to fill in the cracks. It became a bit troublesome after that one evening doing this, and I wanted to experiment trying something else, and that's exactly what I did. I ended up trying out this stuff. Everybody's been ranting and raving about the expanding spray foam the last couple of years, and I was a bit hesitant and reluctant on doing it, but after, like I say, spending a whole evening on just that little section, I was ready to give it a try. And I gotta say, after now using it and getting comfortable with it, I am completely sold on it. I will no longer ever be returning to the old rock molds and hydrocal plaster such as over here. Like I say, this took a whole evening to do. I had all of this done and sprayed within 15-20 minutes. Yeah, I'll take it. It's a much nicer and refreshing way of doing this. Now, I will admit, when you get up close to it and up on top of it, it's not quite as eloquent or refined as, say, the rock molds, but for the price and the amount of effort that has to go into it, yeah, I'll take it. I mean, I'm trying my best here, don't get me wrong, but I'm not building a layout for the Smithsonian. This is a nice layout here in my house for my own personal use. So yeah, I'm sold on it. I'm quite thrilled with it. A couple things I learned with this expanding foam that I thought I'd share with you guys in case you too are interested in using this stuff. I would highly recommend not using this one, the big gap filler. I would stick to using the original formula, the red can. This stuff expands quite a bit more than the red can stuff does. You may have noticed when we were going over the plaster, I ran out of plaster cloth over here in this small section. And since I was decided to use this expanded foam, I decided not to put any plaster cloth here. Again, I had ran out, so I picked up a couple cans of the big gap filler and filled all of this in with the big gap stuff and then used the red can everywhere else. And as you can see, that big gap stuff filled this out quite nice. But that did leave me having to do quite a bit of trimming in certain spots because, again, this stuff does expand quite a bit. And that leads into the next thing. Obviously, yes, you can very easily trim this stuff to any size or formation that you need. But honestly, By all means, I would try not to trim or cut into this stuff if at all possible. It's kind of hard to explain. So when this stuff dries, it creates kind of a nice smooth outer shell on it, kind of like an egg. I mean, obviously it's not hard, it's foam, but it does create a nice smooth shell on the surface when it sets up and cures. You lose that the instant you start cutting into this stuff. It's foam. It's super, super porous behind that really thin shell. Let me see if I can find a section here to show that off. I mean, it literally looks like Swiss cheese behind this shell. I found big gaping holes all the way down to little pin-size holes, and they're everywhere. It's very hard to try and carve it out and try and make it look natural. I mean, I guess you could try and fill it in. I don't know what kind of material or filler you would use, being that this is foam. But yeah, like I say, I'd get a scrap piece of cardboard or something and do a couple practice runs of this stuff. Get a feel for it, how it lays out, and how to apply it. That way you can apply it in a manner to where you won't have to trim it and have to deal with all that porous pinhole stuff. This next one really kind of caught me off guard, and I was not expecting it. Obviously, this stuff is expanding foam. You spray it, and as it cures and dries, it gets larger. Not only does it expand, but I also found out it contracts too. It gets smaller. Like I say, I really was not expecting this. So when I sprayed this stuff on, I started on the tabletop and worked my way up, creating the rocks. I let this stuff cure for a day or two, and then I started painting it. Well, when I came back to start painting it, I had discovered it contracted so much it lifted itself off of the tabletop, creating a big gap down here. I ended up having to fill this gap in with some of our foam board insulation and ground cover that you can see here to make it kind of look like a hill going up into it. But yeah, in reality, there's a huge gap in between the table and the foam here. Like I say, that really caught me off guard. I was not expecting it to shrink. I don't know if that's because I painted it or started painting it too early, or if the temperature changes here in the room. I don't know what happened with it in that regard, but it does contract and expand at the same time a little bit. The last bit of advice I think I can give on this stuff is don't be like me after it's been applied and have a little mini panic attack standing back looking at it. I did, man. After I applied this stuff and stood back to take it in, I couldn't help but think, man, what have I done? This stuff looks like crap. Looks nothing like a rock wall. I've destroyed my mountain. I really messed up. Shoot. But it's all good. Once you get some color applied to this stuff, I'm telling you, that's what really sells this stuff. Because, yeah, straight out of the can, it dries to kind of like a pale yellow. And sure, it doesn't at first look anything like rock. It looks like exactly what it is, blobs of expanding foam. But once you get some color on it, that's what really sells this stuff. Don't take it at face value at first. Wait till you get some color on it, and I'm sure you'll be thrilled with it. And that leads us into our next step of building the mountain, getting everything painted. I started out with the rocks, and for these I used my cheap tubes of acrylic paints, mixed up a gray color that I liked, and applied several coats of that. Once that had dried, I went over the rocks with many different washes, black washes, brown washes, red washes, a bunch of earth tone washes, and applied those in different segments or days and let them dry independently of each other. Once I got all of those applied and dried, the remaining bare plaster cloth got painted with the leftover brown paint that I had used to paint the entire base of the layout from the beginning. Luckily, I still had quite a bit of this stuff left over. One thing I wanted to add before applying the ground cover, I wanted to protect our drivers on the country mountain road above. I mean, if they drove over this cliff, it's over for them. That's one hell of a fall. I got to looking around online and quickly discovered nobody really makes a proper guardrail in O scale, so I was going to be on my own here. Luckily, I still had several sections of the old red bridge left over, and I decided to cut off the top handrails, paint these silver, and get them installed as our guardrails. I think they turned out quite well. And yeah, the last thing to do was get our ground cover applied to the mountain. This is that Adirondack Blend that I've been using exclusively lately. I love this stuff. I think this stuff looks great. Let me know what you guys think. Obviously, I have been working on some of the scenes here around the mountain, but we'll go into detail on those in the future at some point. These are currently a work in progress. This scene down here at the base of the mountain, this is definitely going to be a fun one. I have been working on some other scenes towards the front of the layout here, much smaller scenes. Starting out here under the bridge, I'm sure a lot of you recognize this accessory. This is the Lionel Hobo Campfire. I thought this was a perfect spot for this. The hobos taking shelter under the bridge and got them a fire going. I did use our pink foam board insulation and built up, it's kind of hard to see, built up some hills here. That accessory is really intended to be installed from underneath the layout, but I didn't have a hole saw, nor could I access trying to get a big hole cut underneath the bridge here. So I just built up the foam hills around it, like a lot of people do, but I think it turned out quite well. Moving up to the top here, as you can see, got another scene going on. We got us a signal bridge. I know I'm going to probably piss off or aggravate a lot of the hardcore, realistic, or prototypical guys. We got a 2-track signal bridge here for just 1 track. I really don't care. I like it. I think it's cool as hell. I mean, this thing is way too cool not to use. My friend Tony over at Roundhouse South Trains actually gifted this and a couple other signals to me that came in a collection. All of them were in pretty rough shape. Honestly, this one was in the worst. Looked like an elephant had stampeded over this thing. The signal heads were busted off of the bridge in pieces. A lot of the little wires were ripped out. The handrails were all bent and the ladder. I had to spend quite a bit of time resoldering all them little micro wires back in place, gluing the heads back together and onto the bridge and straightening all the little details out, but I did get it working and functioning, and it looks good once again. I had it running at 100%, but of course, now that it's here on the layout, it's acting up, of course. Isn't that always how it goes? For some reason, it's having a hard time functioning or switching from yellow to green. The lights want to stay yellow over green. So we'll just say it's a proceed with caution signal. But I have a Lionel 153 IR sensor back there triggering it, and it is working. It does still switch to red when the train goes by. I did have to elevate this a little higher for some of our taller modern cars to come through here. So once again, that foam board came in handy. I built some hills, built several hills over here. We got one big one over here, one here, and then one behind the water tower. The water tower, I had to put some work in. I replaced a motor gear, got that working again. I still got to get a switch installed on the layout to control it. And then we got some Lionel floodlights here illuminating the scene. I'm sure you guys noticed one thing these scenes are missing and are in desperate need of are some trees. They really need some trees pretty badly. I am working on that. I reached out to our man Roman, our tree guy, over at Trident Customs off of Etsy. I placed a fairly decent order with him last week, and he's currently working on putting that order together for me. Hopefully they'll be getting shipped out here soon. I am probably going to have to place another order to finish the mountain off, but I am excited on getting those. Once they show up, I am going to focus on getting this little spot over here up top finished off. I want to get that finished because that's our holdup on working or proceeding down the rest of the layout. I still have to crawl up here and kneel on the layout to access up here. So once this scene up here is finished, we can start working on more scenes and working our way down the layout. But yeah, guys, that's what I've been up to lately. Not the biggest progress in the world, but still progress nonetheless. I hope you enjoyed this quick video on our new mountain and our other little scenes. If you do have any suggestions or ideas on things we could add to any of them, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. But anyways, guys, as always, until next time, my name is Zach, and this is Country Bunkers Trains. Y'all take care. I'll see you on the next go-around.